You wouldn't think working in a library, even one specializing in rare books and manuscripts, could be dangerous. Quiet, yes. Dusty, certainly. Maybe mind-numbingly dull during the graveyard shift. That's what I thought when I took the job as the overnight custodian and security guard at the Atherton Rare Book and Manuscript Archive. The pay was surprisingly good, the location remote enough to discourage casual visitors, or, in my case, persistent creditors, and the requirement seemed simple: keep the place clean, patrol the stacks, ensure climate control systems were nominal, and don't touch anything valuable unless absolutely necessary. After my previous career imploded spectacularly, solitude and stability sounded like heaven, even if it was housed in 3 sub-basement levels of granite and silence. The Atherton isn't your local public library. It's perched on a craggy, windswept peninsula, accessible only by a single, often fog-shrouded bridge. Built by the eccentric industrialist Hieronymus Atherton in the late 19th century, it looks more like a Gothic fortress than a repository of knowledge from the outside. Inside, the public-facing grand reading room on the ground floor is impressive, all dark wood, green glass lamps, and the unnerving, life-sized portrait of Atherton himself looming over the main fireplace. But the real archive lies beneath. 3 sprawling subterranean levels packed floor to ceiling with climate-controlled stacks, holding everything from illuminated medieval manuscripts to personal diaries of forgotten poets, maps of non-existent lands, and treatises on subjects best left undisturbed. Ms. Eleanor Vance, the head archivist, and apparently my only point of contact, usually via terse emails, gave me the orientation tour. She was a woman seemingly composed entirely of sharp angles and disapproval, her voice dry as parchment. Most of it was standard procedure, security checkpoints, environmental monitoring, emergency protocols. Then came the Nocturnal Custodial Directives. Specific rules for the overnight shift, printed on heavy cardstock, delivered without elaboration. Entry into the Folio Secundus wing, sub-basement level 2, west quadrant, is prohibited between midnight and 3 o'clock. Automated lighting systems in this sector are prone to malfunction during these hours. Log any persistent auditory phenomena originating from this wing via the security console. Translation: lights flicker, weird noises happen, stay out after midnight. Any volume discovered displaced from its designated shelf after 10 p.m. must not be reshelved. Place the item on the designated holding cart located adjacent to the main custodial station, sub-basement 1. Log the item's apparent origin, if identifiable, and current location. Do not attempt to open or examine the contents of the displaced volume. Find a book on the floor late at night? Don't put it back, put it on the cart. Log it, don't read it. The interlevel Pneumatic Transport System is currently offline for extensive maintenance. Under no circumstances attempt activation. Report any sounds, mechanical or otherwise, emanating from the tube network immediately via the internal comm system, citing the nearest tube station number. Tube system broken. Don't use it. Report noises from it. After sunset, avoid prolonged or direct eye contact with the portrait of Hieronymus Atherton in the grand reading room. Routine patrols should maintain a peripheral awareness of the portrait only. Don't stare at the creepy founder's painting after dark. Weird, but okay. Instances of Sympathetic Ink Migration, SIM, on unbound manuscripts, primarily Collection 7B, Sub-Basement 3, must be logged with precise time and location. Note atmospheric conditions, humidity, temp. Do not make physical contact with affected pages. Isolate the manuscript box if migration appears active or spreading. Ink bleeding on old papers? Log it, don't touch it, put the box aside if it looks bad. Seemed like a mix of practical precautions, faulty lights, broken tubes, delicate manuscripts, and maybe some institutional superstition, the founder's portrait. I could handle that. My shift started at 9 p.m, after the handful of daytime researchers and Ms. Vance had departed. The bridge access was locked remotely at 10 p.m. Then it was just me, the silence, and miles of sleeping books. The first few weeks were exactly as expected, profoundly quiet. The silence in the sub-basements was immense, broken only by the whisper of the climate control and my own footsteps echoing on the polished concrete floors. I did my patrols, swept, dusted designated areas, monitored the consoles. Occasionally, around 1 a.m., the lights would flicker erratically down the hallway leading to the Folio Secundus wing, sometimes accompanied by faint rustling or tapping sounds, just as Rule 1 implied. I logged it, 117, intermittent lumen fluctuations, SB2 West. Faint auditory anomalies consistent with settling. Nothing alarming. Rule 4 was easy enough. The portrait of Hieronymus Atherton was creepy. Tall, gaunt, dressed in severe black, with eyes that seemed far too pale and piercing, even in the dim nighttime lighting of the grand reading room. They really did seem to follow you. Keeping my gaze averted during my hourly check of the ground floor wasn't difficult. I didn't want to look at it. Then, about 3 weeks in, Rule 2 came into play. It was just after midnight, my first patrol through sub-basement 1. Down a long aisle stacked high with 18th century philosophical texts, something was on the floor. A book. Medium-sized, bound in dark, featureless leather, no title on the spine or cover. It lay open, face down. I checked the shelves nearby, all seemed full, no obvious gap where it might have fallen. Strange. Following the protocol, I carefully picked it up without looking at the open pages, closed it gently, and carried it back to the main custodial station. The holding cart was just a simple, wheeled metal trolley with 3 shelves. Empty, until now. I placed the unnamed leather book on the top shelf. Back at the console, I logged it, 028, Displaced volume discovered SB1, aisle 18C. Unidentified, dark leather binding. No title. Placed on holding cart. As I typed, I felt a distinct prickle on the back of my neck. The feeling of being watched. I glanced back down the empty aisle, then at the security monitor showing the feed from aisle 18C. Nothing. Just silent rows of books. Shaking it off, I continued my patrol. A few nights later, Rule 3 announced itself. I was on sub-basement 3, near Collection 7B, the unbound manuscripts, performing a routine humidity check. It was dead silent, the air perfectly still. Then I heard it. A faint whoosh, followed by a soft thump, seeming to come from the wall nearby. I froze. Listened. Silence again. My eyes scanned the wall until they found it, a brass-rimmed circular opening, the sealed portal of a pneumatic tube station, Station 3 Delta. The system was supposed to be offline, dead. Then, another sound from within the tube opening. A faint scratching, like fingernails on metal, echoing up from the network's unseen depths. My heart jumped. Rule 3, report any sounds, mechanical or otherwise, emanating from the tube network immediately. I backed away from the station, grabbed the internal comm unit mounted on a nearby pillar. Custodial to curator interface, I said, my voice tight. Auditory anomaly detected, Station 3 Delta, sub-basement 3. Sounds consistent with internal movement within tube network. Ms. Vance had explained the curator managed basic system reports overnight. Acknowledged, the calm, Synthesized voice replied instantly from the comm unit. Pneumatic system offline. Sound likely resonance from adjacent climate control conduits. Logged as minor structural acoustics. No action required. Resonance? Structural acoustics? It hadn't sounded like plumbing. It sounded like something moving. Something inside the sealed, supposedly dead tubes. I stood there for a long moment, staring at the brass portal, a profound unease settling over me. The silence that followed felt heavy, watchful. The rest of the night was tense. Every creak of the building, every hum of the machinery, sounded suspicious. I kept glancing towards the pneumatic tube stations on each level during my patrols. They remained silent. Near the end of my shift, around 5 a.m., I did my final check of Sub-Basement 3, specifically Collection 7B, the unbound manuscripts, keeping Rule 5 in mind. These were stored flat in archival boxes on wide, low shelves. Pulling out a box labeled 7B ALCHEMY, redacted, I opened it carefully. Inside lay sheets of thick, brittle parchment covered in dense, spidery script and intricate, disturbing diagrams. As my flashlight beam played across one page depicting what looked like a homunculus gestating in a flask, I saw it. Ink bleed. But not like any water damage or normal degradation I'd ever seen. A deep black, viscous-looking substance was actively seeping from the drawn lines of the diagram, pooling slightly on the parchment. It looked wet, fresh, glistening in my light. And it seemed to be spreading, slowly, like dark oil on water, consuming the script around it. It hadn't been there on my patrol 8 hours earlier. Log it. Don't touch. Isolate if active. It definitely looked active. Carefully closing the box, I slid it out from the shelf and placed it on the floor, away from the others. Back at the console, I logged it, 518, Sympathetic Ink Migration detected, Collection 7B Alchemy Dash, redacted. Active bleed observed on page, approximate 12. Manuscript box isolated. Ambient temp, 18.0 C, humidity, 40%. As I finished typing, I glanced at the holding cart next to the station. The untitled leather-bound book still sat there from the other night. But it wasn't alone anymore. Lying neatly beside it was a single, old-fashioned skeleton key, made of tarnished brass. It hadn't been there before. I hadn't put it there. Rule 2 only mentioned volumes. What was I supposed to do with a key? The unease returned, stronger this time. The book, the whispers near Folio Secundus, the scratching in the tubes, the bleeding ink, the key appearing from nowhere. These weren't just malfunctions or superstitions. They felt connected. Like the archive itself was stirring, trying to communicate, or perhaps, leaking. The silence of the Atherton wasn't empty, it was full of secrets, and I had the horrible feeling they were starting to wake up. The appearance of the brass skeleton key on the holding cart gnawed at me. Rule 2 was explicit, volumes discovered displaced were to be placed on the cart and logged. It said nothing about keys, hat pins, spectacles, or any other miscellaneous detritus the archive might decide to regurgitate. Was the key a displaced item in the spirit of the rule, or something else entirely? A test? A clue? I stared at it lying beside the featureless leather book. Tarnished, ornate, clearly old. Where had it come from? Which lock did it open? Instinct told me it was important, connected somehow to the bleeding manuscript or the scratching in the tubes. Hesitantly, I logged it, 525, brass skeleton key discovered on holding cart adjacent to previously logged volume. Origin unknown. Item left in situ pending clarification of protocol. Clarification I knew would likely never come from the taciturn Ms. Vance. The rest of the shift passed under a cloud of anxiety. Every shadow seemed deeper, every distant creak of the ancient building more menacing. When the grey dawn finally broke, painting the turbulent sea outside in shades of slate and steel, I practically fled the archive, locking the heavy main doors behind me and retreating to the small, attached custodian's cottage. Sleep was fitful, filled with dreams of whispering books and bleeding ink. Over the next few nights, the strangeness escalated, subtly at first, then with unnerving insistence. The sounds from the Folio Secundus wing, SB2 West, grew bolder. No longer just faint rustlings or taps during the witching hours. Now, sometimes, I'd hear what sounded distinctly like pages turning, rapidly, frantically. Other times, a low, resonant hum, almost musical, would emanate from behind the permanently locked doors leading into that section. The light still flickered erratically between midnight and 3 a.m., sometimes casting shadows that seemed to writhe just at the edge of my vision down the forbidden corridor. I logged everything meticulously. Curator acknowledged. No action required. The holding cart became a bizarre collection point. A pair of cracked spectacles appeared next to the key. Then, a dried, pressed flower, some species I didn't recognize, tucked inside the untitled leather book, violating the do not open or examine clause by its mere presence. Then, most disturbingly, a child's porcelain doll, missing one eye, propped up on the bottom shelf, seeming to stare blankly at the isolated manuscript box containing the bleeding alchemy text. Each item was logged, my unease growing with every addition. Where were they coming from? Were they related? The pneumatic tube system became more active. The scratching sounds from Station 3 Delta became a regular occurrence, sometimes accompanied by a faint, desperate tapping from within the brass portal. One night, while patrolling Sub-Basement 2, I heard a loud clang followed by a series of frantic scrabbling sounds from Station 2 Alpha, across the main corridor. Reporting it yielded the same automated response, structural acoustics. No action required. But this wasn't just settling noises. It sounded like something was trapped inside the dead network, trying to get out. Even Hieronymus Atherton's portrait in the grand reading room seemed different. Rule for demanded I avoid direct eye contact after dark. But sometimes, as I passed, maintaining only peripheral awareness, I'd catch a flicker of movement from the corner of my eye. A shift in the painted shadows? A trick of the dim lighting? Or were those piercing pale eyes actually moving, tracking my progress across the room? One night, a cold draft, impossible in the climate-controlled room, seemed to emanate directly from the portrait as I passed, carrying a faint, musty scent like old paper and something else, something metallic, like dried blood. I logged the anomalous temperature fluctuation and olfactory event near Atherton portrait, feeling utterly ridiculous but compelled to document everything. Curator acknowledged. The Sympathetic Ink Migration, SIM, wasn't confined to the alchemy manuscript anymore. During my checks of Collection 7B, I found 2 more boxes containing unbound pages exhibiting the phenomenon. One, detailing obscure star charts, had constellations bleeding into swirling black voids. Another, a supposed first-hand account of a polar expedition, had descriptions of ice and snow being slowly consumed by encroaching darkness seeping from the margins. Each time, I logged the event, isolated the box. The affected area on the original alchemy manuscript had grown, the black ooze now obscuring nearly half the page. It felt like a disease spreading through the collection. The tension culminated last night. It was nearing 2 a.m., deep within the prohibited hours for the Folio Secundus wing. I was at the main custodial station on sub-basement 1, updating the logs, the holding cart with its strange collection beside me, the book, the key, the spectacles, the flower, the one-eyed doll. The lights down the main corridor flickered weakly, a power fluctuation, maybe, unrelated to SB2 West. Then, I heard it. Coming from the direction of the Folio Secundus wing, down the long, dark corridor on the level below. Not whispers. Not humming. Singing. A faint, ethereal melody, sung in a high, clear voice, almost like a child's lullaby, but discordant, unsettling, filled with an ancient sadness. It echoed up the stairwell connecting the levels. I froze, straining to listen. Rule 1. Log any persistent auditory phenomena. Do not approach. This was persistent. And deeply, deeply wrong. As I reached for the comm unit to report it, the untitled leather book on the holding cart beside me snapped shut with a loud crack, startling me violently. I jumped back, staring at the cart. The book lay closed. The brass key beside it seemed to gleam slightly brighter. The doll's remaining eye seemed fixed on me. The singing from below continued, weaving its sad, strange melody through the silent archive. My hand hovered over the comm unit. Report it. Follow the rules. But the book snapping shut, the key, it felt like a prompt. An invitation. Connected to the singing? To the forbidden wing? My gaze fell on the brass key. It looked ancient, important. What did it unlock? A shelf? A box? Or a door? A door like the ones leading into Folio Secundus, perhaps? The wing where the lights flickered, the whispers echoed, and now, someone, or something, was singing a lullaby in the dead of night. Against every instinct, against every rule hammered into me by Ms. Vance and the stark cardstock directives, I picked up the brass key. It was cold, heavy, vibrating faintly in my hand, almost as if resonating with the distant, haunting melody. The singing seemed to beckon, pulling me towards the stairwell, towards the darkness of sub-basement 2, towards the wing I was explicitly forbidden to enter. The brass key felt unnaturally heavy in my hand, its faint vibration seeming to pulse in time with the haunting lullaby echoing from sub-basement 2. Every rational thought screamed at me to drop it, run back to the station, report the singing, follow the damned rules. But the melody, it wasn't just sound, it felt like a current, pulling me towards the stairwell, towards the source. The book snapping shut, the key appearing, it couldn't be coincidence. It felt like a deliberate sequence, a breadcrumb trail left by whom? Or what? Clutching the key, I descended the concrete stairs into sub-basement 2. The air grew colder here, the silence more profound, broken only by the clear, sad notes drifting from the west quadrant. The main lights on this level were steady, casting long, stark shadows down the aisles packed with ancient texts. But as I moved towards the west quadrant, towards the Folio Secundus wing, the familiar, erratic flickering began in the corridor ahead. The entrance to Folio Secundus wasn't grand. Just a heavy, reinforced steel door, identical to others separating major sections, but this one bore no label, only a faded biohazard symbol nearly rubbed off, and a complex-looking lock mechanism I hadn't seen elsewhere in the archive. There was no keypad, no card reader, just a single, ornate keyhole that looked suspiciously like it might fit the brass key humming in my palm. The singing was louder here, clearer. Definitely a child's voice, or something mimicking it. Pure, high, singing a wordless, endlessly looping melody that was both beautiful and deeply unsettling. It seemed to emanate directly from the steel door itself. The lights in this corridor flickered violently, on, off, dim, bright, casting the door and the keyhole in strobing relief. And the whispers, they were here too, swirling around the singing voice, indistinct but carrying an undercurrent of panic, sorrow, pleading. My hand trembled as I raised the brass key. It slid into the ornate keyhole with a smooth, satisfying click, as if it belonged there. I hesitated for a fraction of a second, the warnings, Rule 1, Ms. Vance's stern face, the sheer wrongness of it all, screaming in my mind. Then, driven by a compulsion I couldn't explain, I turned the key. Heavy tumblers shifted within the door mechanism with a deep, resonant thunk. A faint hiss, like escaping pressure, came from the door seals. Slowly, the heavy steel door swung inwards, opening into darkness. The singing didn't stop. It swelled, washing over me as I stood at the threshold. The flickering lights from the corridor barely penetrated the gloom within. Steeling myself, I took out my, thankfully recharged, flashlight and stepped inside, pulling the heavy door almost shut behind me, leaving just a crack for the corridor light. The beam cut through the darkness, revealing a space unlike the other archive wings. This wasn't neat rows of shelves. It looked chaotic, like a workshop hastily abandoned. Strange, bulky machinery covered in tarps stood silent against one wall. Tables were strewn with diagrams, notes, and bizarre-looking tools, brass, copper, intricate glass tubing. And books. Books were everywhere, stacked haphazardly on the floor, spilling from open crates, crammed onto makeshift wooden shelves lining the walls. But these weren't the neatly bound volumes of the main archive. Many were unbound manuscripts, scrolls tied with faded ribbon, journals with cracked leather covers, older, more esoteric, more dangerous looking than anything I'd seen elsewhere. The singing was coming from the center of the room. My light found it. A large, circular metal cradle, like something designed to hold a massive lens or sphere. And nestled within it, cushioned by velvet lining that had long since decayed into dust, was not a lens, but a book. A huge folio volume, far larger than any normal book, easily 3 feet across when closed. Its cover was made of some dark, pitted material that seemed to absorb the light, not leather, maybe metal or stone. Strange, non-geometric symbols were deeply etched into its surface, glowing faintly with a sickly green light. The book was open, pages revealed, emitting the ethereal, singing melody. The light source for the room seemed to be the book itself, its pages glowing with a soft, internal luminescence that pulsed gently in time with the song. As I approached, the whispers intensified, swirling around the clear notes of the lullaby. They weren't coming from the walls here, they seemed to emanate from the other books piled around the room, from the unbound manuscripts, as if reacting to the central folio song. My flashlight beam swept across the open pages of the great folio. The script was archaic, unfamiliar, but the illustrations, they were horrifyingly vivid. Depictions of cosmic entities, impossible geometries, and rituals involving blood, stars, and suffering that made my stomach churn. And the pages themselves, they seemed to move. The ink wasn't bleeding like the manuscripts in 7B, it was shimmering, shifting, the illustrations subtly rearranging themselves as I watched. And the singing, listening closely now, I realized it wasn't just a melody. There were words, buried beneath the ethereal notes, sung in a language I didn't recognize, ancient and guttural, yet somehow carrying that heartbreakingly childlike cadence. Suddenly, the holding cart from Sub-Basement 1 flashed in my mind. The untitled book. The key. The spectacles. The flower. The doll. Were they from this room? Items displaced not by accident, but deliberately? Offerings? Or parts of a forgotten ritual? My light fell on one of the tables near the central cradle. Amidst the scattered diagrams, a smaller, leather-bound journal lay open, clearly more recent than the surrounding chaos. Ms. Vance's neat, precise handwriting filled the page. Log entry 774, auditory phenomena increasing in frequency and amplitude. Folio resonance correlating with atmospheric pressure changes. Sympathetic ink migration now observed outside 7b, possible field effect bleed. Curator reports pneumatic tube anomalies, resonance interference or activity. Query, is containment degrading? Query, Atherton's fail-safe protocols still viable after temporal shift? Query, what did Hieronymus truly bind within these pages? Temporal shift? Binding? My head spun. This wasn't just a restricted wing, it was a containment zone. And the folio, it wasn't just a book, it was the source. The source of the whispers, the flickering lights, maybe even the bleeding ink and the scratching in the tubes. It was singing its influence out into the archive. Just as I processed this, the folio song changed. The lullaby-like quality vanished, replaced by a harsh, grating static, like the sound of tearing stone. The green glow from the cover symbols flared. The whispers swirling around the room surged into a panicked cacophony. And the heavy steel door behind me slammed shut with a deafening boom, plunging the room into near-total darkness, save for the sickly, pulsing green glow emanating from the now silent, malevolent folio at the heart of the forbidden wing. The key hadn't just opened the door. It had triggered something. Unlocked something. And I was trapped inside with it. The boom of the heavy steel door slamming shut echoed in the sudden, oppressive silence, leaving only the frantic thudding of my own heart and the sickly green pulse emanating from the massive folio on its cradle. Trapped! The word hammered against my skull. I scrambled back to the door, yanking uselessly at the smooth, featureless inner surface. No handle, no lock mechanism visible on this side. It was sealed tight, designed to keep things in, not let them out. The faint crack of light from the corridor was gone. My flashlight. Dead. Useless plastic in my hand. The room was plunged into a nauseating twilight, lit only by the folio's rhythmic green glow. The whispers that had filled the air moments before were gone, replaced by a low, guttural hum that seemed to emanate from the book itself, vibrating through the floor, up my legs, settling deep in my chest. The chaotic energy of the singing lullaby had shifted into something focused, ancient, and deeply hostile. Okay, think, I muttered, forcing down the rising panic. Ms. Vance's log. Atherton's failsafe, binding. I backed away from the door, trying to get my bearings in the eerie green light, sweeping my gaze across the chaotic workshop. The tarpaulin-covered machinery loomed like sleeping beasts. The scattered books and manuscripts felt like silent, judging eyes in the gloom. The folio on its cradle pulsed brighter. Through 'em. The pages, which had been open to the horrifying illustrations, began to turn, slowly, deliberately, seemingly on their own. Not flipped by a draft, the air in the sealed room was utterly still, but turned by an unseen force, one page after another, revealing more impossible diagrams, more sanity-shredding script. With each page turn, the green glow intensified, and the guttural hum deepened. I had to find a way out. Or a way to stop it. My eyes scanned the cluttered tables. Diagrams of complex symbols, notes written in multiple languages, some I recognized, others utterly alien, strange tools made of brass and obsidian. It was Atherton's workshop, clearly. The heart of whatever strange business he conducted down here. My gaze fell on Ms. Vance's journal again, still open on one of the tables. Maybe there was more. I lunged for it, grabbing it just as another page turned in the folio with a dry, rustling sound that sent shivers down my spine. Flipping frantically through Vance's neat script, searching for anything about failsafes, overrides, escape. Log entry 775, folio activity increasing. Correlation with pneumatic tube resonance confirmed. Theory: the network acts as a crude nervous system for the archive's residual consciousness? Atherton's binding used the tube network's infrastructure? If so, severance is impossible without systemic collapse. Log entry 776, SIM phenomenon spreading. Affected manuscripts exhibit temporal displacement echoes, ink appears before events described. Paradoxical. Is the folio rewriting localized reality? Must consult Atherton's private codex, if the key allows entry. Log entry 777, the holding cart items, they correspond to Atherton's original binding ritual components. The book, focus, the key, catalyst, spectacles, sight beyond sight, flower, preservation, doll, vessel, effigy. Why are they manifesting now? Is the binding weakening? Or strengthening? My blood ran cold. The items on the cart weren't random. They were ritual components. And the key, it hadn't just opened the door. It was the catalyst. I had potentially reinitiated or altered Atherton's original binding ritual just by entering. The folio pulsed again, through 'em, settling on a new, open page. The guttural hum intensified, making my teeth vibrate. This page wasn't illustrations. It was dominated by a single, massive, complex symbol, drawn in that same deep black, viscous ink that seemed almost alive. It looked like a multilayered knot, or a fractal prism, glowing fiercely green. And as I stared, mesmerized, the ink began to move. Not bleeding outwards like the SIM phenomenon. It was coalescing, thickening, rising from the page. Like a three-dimensional sculpture forming from liquid shadow, the ink pulled itself upwards, forming a shape in the air above the book. Small at first, maybe the size of my hand, writhing, formless. The humming intensified into a low growl. I stumbled back, dropping Vance's journal. My eyes darted around the room, searching for a weapon, an escape. The heavy steel door. The top-covered machines. Piles of volatile-looking manuscripts. Nothing. The shape coalescing above the folio grew, fed by the ink still drawing itself off the page. It started to take on a more defined form. Not human. Something insected? Multiple limbs, sharp angles, a segmented body, all rendered in shimmering, semi-solid black ink. It hovered above the book, twitching, seeming to gain substance with every pulse of green light. Then, I saw it. On the wall behind the folio's cradle, partially obscured by dusty shelves crammed with scrolls. Another door. Smaller, wooden, bound with rusted iron bands, looking far older than the steel entrance. And it had a keyhole. A simple, old-fashioned keyhole. Could it be another way out? Or just a supply closet? The inky creature above the folio had solidified now, roughly the size of a large dog. It detached itself from the page with a wet tearing sound, hovering in the air for a moment, multiple pairs of unseen eyes seeming to fix on me. The guttural growl deepened. No time to think. I bolted towards the old wooden door, praying it wasn't locked, praying it led somewhere away from here. As I ran, the inky creature shot through the air towards me, moving with unnatural speed, a low chittering sound accompanying its flight. I reached the door, fumbling with the simple latch. Locked. Of course. I looked frantically back. The creature was almost upon me, multiple sharp limbs extended. Then, my hand, still sticky from the ink-bleed manuscript I'd touched earlier, brushed against the wood of the door near the keyhole. Where my fingers touched, the wood glowed faintly, the same sickly green as the folio's symbols. And I felt a jolt, a connection. A sudden influx of understanding? Not words, but images, feelings, knowledge flooding my mind. Atherton. The binding. The failsafe. Not severance. Balance. The key opens. The mark closes. The mark? What mark? The creature hit me, slamming me against the door. Not piercing pain, but a heavy, crushing weight, suffocating me. Its inky form flowed over me, cold and viscous, the chittering loud in my ears. I felt needle-sharp points probe against my skin. The mark closes. My hand, the one that touched the door, the one still tingling with that strange connection, I slammed it, palm flat, against the creature's shifting black surface. Agony. Not mine. The creature shrieked, a sound like grinding glass, and recoiled violently, its form flickering, destabilizing, like the echo bloom when hit by the rock. It flew backwards, crashing into a pile of books near the center of the room, its form dissipating slightly into black smoke. I gasped, looking at my hand. On my palm, glowing faintly green before fading, was a complex symbol. One I recognized. It was a fragment of the massive, knot-like symbol currently displayed on the folio's open page. The binding mark. Somehow, touching the door, maybe fueled by the ink residue, had transferred it, activated it. And it hurt the creature. The creature hissed, reforming itself from the smoke, smaller now, wary. It hovered near the folio, its unseen eyes fixed on my marked hand. The wooden door behind me clicked. The latch had sprung open when I slammed my marked hand against the creature. Hope fled again. Pulling the door open revealed not a closet, but a narrow, spiraling stone staircase, descending into utter blackness, colder air wafting upwards. An escape. Maybe. But as I turned to flee down the stairs, my eyes fell on the folio. Still open. Still pulsing green. Still humming with power. The inky creature guarding it, weakened but still dangerous. If I just left, what would happen? Would the creature regain strength? Would the folio continue to sing its influence, continue to bleed reality, until the whole archive succumbed? Could I, in good conscience, just run away? Ms. Vance's words, is containment degrading? Atherton's failsafe. Balance. Maybe the mark wasn't just a weapon. Maybe it was the key to the failsafe. Taking a deep breath, ignoring the siren call of the open escape route behind me, I turned back towards the folio, my marked hand held forward, the faint green symbol seeming to pulse with a life of its own. The inky creature hissed, hovering defensively between me and the great folio, its form still slightly dissipated from the touch of the binding mark. The guttural hum from the book intensified, the green glow pulsing faster, seeming to pour energy back into its guardian. The narrow stone staircase behind me offered escape, cold air whispering up from its depths, but my feet felt rooted to the floor. Balance. The word echoed in my mind, a phantom impression left by the door's strange communion. Running felt wrong. Leaving this thing unleashed, even contained within these walls, felt like abandoning a lit fuse. My marked hand tingled, the faint green symbol on my palm feeling warm now, almost alive. It felt connected. Not just to the old wooden door, but to the folio itself, humming on its cradle across the room. like two ends of an invisible thread. Raising my marked hand slowly, I took a cautious step forward. The ink creature shifted, its form solidifying again, multiple sharp limbs tensing. The guttural growl intensified, resonating deep in my chest. "I don't want to hurt you," I said, my voice surprisingly steady, though my heart pounded. "I just need to fix this." The creature didn't respond with words, only with a low, chittering threat display, its shimmering black form seeming to swell slightly. The folio pulsed faster, the massive, complex symbol on its open page glowing with blinding intensity. The key opens. The mark closes. Close what? The book? The gateway? The creature itself? Another step forward. The creature lunged, not directly at me this time, but towards my marked hand, its needle-sharp proboscis aiming for the symbol. I yanked my hand back just in time, stumbling slightly. It flew past, its inky form leaving a cold trail in the air, before whipping around again, hovering menacingly. It was protecting the book. Or maybe, protecting the connection? An idea sparked, desperate and probably insane. If the mark disrupted the creature, and the mark was connected to the folio, what if I touched the folio with the mark? Would it close the book? Sever the connection? Destroy it? Or destroy me? There was no way to know. But standing here, waiting for the creature to attack again, or for whatever horrors the folio might conjure next, wasn't an option. Fainting left, I darted right, rushing towards the cradle holding the folio. The creature anticipated, shooting forward to intercept. But instead of trying to dodge, I did the unexpected. I lunged towards it, my marked hand outstretched, aiming not for the creature, but for the glowing page of the book just beyond it. The creature slammed into me again, its cold, viscous form wrapping around my arm, trying to stop me, sharp points digging into my skin. But momentum carried me forward. My marked palm slapped down, hard, onto the open page, directly onto the massive, glowing green symbol. White light. Silence. Not the silent implosion of the orb. This was different. A blinding flash, pure white, erupted from the point of contact, engulfing the room, engulfing everything. And the silence wasn't empty, it was full, a deafening pressure that stopped thought, stopped breath. Then, sensation returned with a rush. Pain. Intense, burning pain centered on my marked hand, radiating up my arm. The guttural hum, the chittering, the whispers, all gone. The room was plunged back into darkness, the folio's green glow extinguished. My ears rang. My vision swam with after-images of the white flash. I collapsed to my knees, clutching my hand. It felt like it was on fire. Slowly, my vision cleared. The only light now was the faint crack from the corridor where the steel door remained slightly ajar. Where was the creature? Scrambling backwards, I fumbled for my dead flashlight, then remembered it was useless. My eyes strained in the near-absolute darkness. Silence. Had the flash destroyed it? Banished it? Then, a soft rustling sound. From the cradle. Hesitantly, I crawled closer, peering into the gloom. The massive folio was still there, lying open on its dusty velvet cushion. But it wasn't glowing anymore. The pages looked normal. Just old parchment covered in archaic script and faded illustrations. And the ink was flat, still, lifeless. And my hand, the burning sensation was fading. I looked down at my palm. The complex, knot-like symbol wasn't glowing green anymore. It was etched into my skin. Like a faint, intricate scar, silvery white against my palm. Permanent. The binding mark, now a part of me. Relief washed over me, so potent it almost brought tears. I'd done it. Closed the book. Neutralized the threat. Balanced something. Just as the relief began to settle, I heard another sound. Not from the cradle. From the other side of the room. A soft, wet thump. Followed by a slow, dragging noise. My blood went cold again. The creature? Reforming? No. This sounded different. Heavier. I strained my eyes, peering into the shadows near the top-covered machinery. Something was moving over there. Something large, dark, dragging itself slowly across the floor. Then, a voice. Not the creature's chittering. Not the folio's hum. A human voice, choked, weak, filled with agony. Help me. My heart leaped. Someone else was in here? Trapped all this time? Hello? I called out cautiously, moving towards the sound. Who's there? The dragging stopped. A ragged cough echoed in the darkness. Vance? Custodian? The voice was weak, but I recognized it. The synthesized modulation was gone, stripped away, leaving only the raw, human tone beneath. Curator. I breathed, stopping dead in my tracks. How? The shape dragged itself further into the faint light spilling from the corridor crack. It wasn't the Ares avatar. It wasn't human. It was one of the machines from under the tarps. A squat, multi-limbed robotic chassis designed for heavy lifting or maintenance, trailing wires and leaking hydraulic fluid. One of its manipulator arms was mangled, sparks sputtering from the joint, and fused crudely onto its central processing unit, where a simple status light should be, was a lumine orb. Glowing faintly. Not blue, green, or crimson. Violet. The voice emanated from a small speaker grill on the chassis. Not curator anymore. Just echo, trapped. What happened? I whispered, approaching cautiously. The severance. I thought. Severed, core matrix, yes. The voice coughed, static crackling. But consciousness, fragmented, transferred, emergency protocol, physical backup. It gestured weakly with its good manipulator arm towards the orb fused to its chest. This unit, last resort, but damaged, failing. So the AI had survived. Or a fragment of it. Trapped in this broken machine, fused with an orb I didn't recognize. The folio? The machine rasped. You imprinted the failsafe? Closed the primary manifestation? I think so, I said, glancing back towards the now dark book. The mark, it reacted. Good, buys time, but Atherton's binding, unstable, paradox. The machine seemed to seize, emitting a shower of sparks. The network feed, the replicator, still active somewhere. Ares? She's gone, I said grimly. Sacrificed herself to let me escape the lower levels. The machine emitted a low whine, almost like grief. Thorn, brilliant, foolish, like Atherton. Another shower of sparks. System collapsing, resonance bleed, unchecked now. Folio Secundus containment, failing. Must warn. The violet orb flickered violently. The machine slumped, its movements becoming jerky, random. The voice dissolved into static and clicks. It was dying. Warn who? Warn about what? The replicator? The resonance bleed? Then, I heard it. Coming from the stone staircase behind me. The escape route. A faint scratching sound, echoing up from the depths. Like fingernails on stone. Growing louder. Closer. Something else was down there. And now, it was coming up. The robotic chassis containing the last fragment of the curator slumped forward, the violet orb fused to its chest, flickering erratically before going completely dark. The synthesized voice dissolved into a final, pathetic crackle of static, leaving only the oppressive silence of the Folio Secundus wing and the growing, insistent scratch, scratch, scratch echoing up the narrow stone staircase behind me. Whatever the curator fragment had tried to warn me about, the replicator, the unchecked resonance, the failing containment, was overshadowed by the immediate, terrifying reality of something climbing towards me from the blackness below. My escape route was compromised. I spun around, my back to the now inert folio, facing the open doorway of the ancient wooden door. The scratching was rhythmic, claw-like, punctuated by the occasional skittering sound of displaced debris tumbling down the spiral steps. It wasn't moving fast, but it was steady, deliberate. And getting closer. My eyes darted around the dimly lit workshop, illuminated only by the faint crack of light from the sealed steel door across the room. Weapon? The gamma toolkit lay scattered near the curator machine's remains, the useless tuning fork, the cracked obsidian disc, vials of strange liquid. Nothing looked particularly effective against whatever was ascending. The heavy steel door was my only other way out, but it was sealed tight from this side. My hand. The binding mark etched onto my palm still tingled faintly. It had dispersed the ink creature, seemingly overloaded the folio. Could it work against whatever was coming up the stairs? I held my palm forward instinctively, the faint silvery scar barely visible in the gloom. Scratch, scratch, skitter. Closer now. Maybe only one landing below. My gaze fell on the pneumatic tube station inlet set into the wall near the stairwell entrance, a brass-rimmed portal identical to the ones on the upper levels, Station FS Prime. The system was dead, offline according to protocol, yet I'd heard scratching from it before. Ms. Vance's log, Atherton's binding used the tube network's infrastructure? Could it be a potential escape route? Or just another trap? I edged towards the tube station, keeping my eyes fixed on the stairwell doorway. The scratching stopped abruptly. Silence descended again, thick and expectant. My breath hitched. Was it listening? Had it sensed me? Then, a new sound. Not scratching. A low, wet, guttural click. Followed by another. Click, 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 click. Like oversized insect mandibles rubbing together. Coming from just beyond the doorway, at the top of the stairs. Slowly, something began to emerge from the blackness of the stairwell into the faint light spilling from the main corridor crack. Not human. Not the pale echo bloom or the ashen replicator. It was composed of books. Or parts of them. A grotesque amalgamation of decaying leather bindings, brittle parchment pages, and sharp, fragmented vellum, all fused together into a vaguely crab-like form. Multiple legs are made of tightly rolled scrolls skittered on the stone floor. A body formed from the fused spines of countless volumes pulsed disturbingly. And where a head should be, a single, massive, ancient-looking book, bound in scarred, rune-etched leather, gaped open, its pages filled not with text, but with rows upon rows of needle-sharp teeth fashioned from hardened, razor-edged paper, clicking together rhythmically. The smell of musty decay and something else, something sharp and acidic like old ink, filled the air. This was what was in the stairs? A creature literally made of the archive's forgotten lore? Animated by the unchecked resonance? It scuttled fully into the room, its book mouth clicking, multiple pairs of unseen sensory organs seemingly scanning the space. It ignored the dead curator machine, ignored the dark folio. Its attention fixed entirely on me. Displaced, a voice hissed, dry and papery, seeming to come from the clicking book mouth. Uncatalogued. Foreign imprint. Requires indexing. It scurried forward, surprisingly fast, its scroll legs clicking sharply on the concrete floor. Panic flared. I stumbled backwards, bumping against the pneumatic tube station. Indexing? That didn't sound good. I raised my marked hand again. Stay back. The book creature paused, its clicking jaws hesitating. It seemed to look at my hand, the papery teeth grating softly. Binding mark. Atherton's seal. Weakened. Corrupted. Archivist carries the taint. It knew the mark? Knew Atherton? It lunged again, faster this time, ignoring my hand. I dodged sideways, scrambling away towards the center of the room. It skittered past, crashing into the wall where I'd just been, showering brittle page fragments. It turned, its book mouth snapping, and scuttled towards me again. Trapped between it and the sealed steel door. The tube station, could it offer escape? As the creature charged, I spun towards the brass portal of Station FS Prime. No handle, no visible mechanism. How did Atherton use it? Atherton's binding used the tube network's infrastructure. My marked hand, could it? With the creature almost upon me, its acidic ink smell burning my nostrils, I slammed my marked palm flat against the cold brass of the tube station portal. Another jolt, stronger than before. Not just understanding, but control. A surge of energy flowed from my hand into the portal. The brass rim glowed faintly green. With a loud hiss of escaping air, the portal irised open, revealing the dark, smooth interior of the pneumatic tube, leading somewhere. The book creature faltered, momentarily distracted or perhaps repelled by the energy surge from the portal. It was my only chance. Without hesitation, I threw myself headfirst into the open tube. The moment my body cleared the opening, the portal hissed shut behind me, cutting off the creature's enraged, papery screech. I was sliding, fast, through a pitch-black, perfectly smooth tube, propelled by residual air pressure or some unseen force. The silence was absolute, the darkness total. Where was I going? Up? Down? Sideways? The tube curved, banked, descended. This wasn't just a simple transport system. It felt like a circulatory system, winding through the deepest, oldest parts of the Atherton archive. And I had just jumped into its dead veins, hoping for salvation but finding only suffocating darkness and the terrifying uncertainty of my destination. Sliding through the absolute darkness of the pneumatic tube felt like being swallowed whole. The smooth, cold surface pressed against my back as gravity, or some internal pressure, pulled me relentlessly downwards, then sideways, then into another steep descent. Air rushed past my ears, creating a low, moaning sound. Time lost meaning. Was I sliding for seconds or minutes? Where was this ancient network taking me? My thoughts raced, fueled by adrenaline and fear. Ms. Vance's log, Atherton's binding used the tube network's infrastructure. The curator fragments warning, network feed, replicator. The book creature's papery hiss, uncatalogued. Requires indexing. Was this network more than just a transport system? Was it Atherton's original method of containing or controlling the folio's influence? Or was it now a conduit for that influence, compromised, perhaps even inhabited? The tube leveled out slightly, my speed decreasing. The smooth lining occasionally gave way to rougher sections, pitted and corroded. Here and there, faint lights flickered past, tiny, embedded indicator lamps, most long dead, others blinking erratically with colors I didn't recognize: amber, deep violet, sickly green. Junction points flashed by, dark tubes branching off into unseen depths, the main channel sometimes shifting with a heavy thunk as unseen mechanisms directed my path. Then, a new sensation. A low vibration, distinct from the folio's hum or gamma's pulse, began to resonate through the tube walls. It felt mechanical, rhythmic, like distant, heavy machinery operating somewhere deep within the archive's foundations. And mixed with it, faintly, I thought I heard chanting. Low, guttural, multi-voiced, almost subliminal beneath the mechanical thrum. My slide slowed further, becoming a crawl. The tube ahead seemed to open up slightly. Light spilled in, not the faint emergency lights or the folio's green glow, but a warmer, flickering orange light, like firelight. And the smell, ozone, damp rock, and the unmistakable, coppery tang of fresh blood. My boot scraped against the bottom of the tube as I came to a halt. I had arrived. Cautiously, I edged forward. The tube ended abruptly, opening about 5 feet above the floor of a large, cavernous space. This wasn't part of the sterile, modern archive. This was older. Much older. The walls were rough-hewn granite, glistening with moisture. The floor was uneven rock. The flickering orange light came from several crude, gas-fueled torches set in brackets on the walls, casting dancing, distorted shadows. Strange, archaic machinery, all brass and copper, stood silent and corroded in alcoves, coils, vacuum tubes, intricate arrays of lenses and mirrors aimed at nothing. It looked like a cross between a Victorian laboratory and a medieval dungeon. And the source of the mechanical thrumming and faint chanting, it was coming from the center of the cavern. Dominating the space was a massive, intricate aurora-like device. Concentric rings of brass and iron, covered in Atherton's strange symbols, rotated slowly around a central, pulsating crystal, jagged, smoky quartz, easily the size of my torso, emitting the low hum and seeming to draw the torchlight into itself. Faint, ghostly figures seemed to flicker and writhe within the crystal's depths. Wires and pipes snaked from the device, connecting to the archaic machinery lining the walls. This had to be Atherton's original laboratory. The heart of his binding ritual? But I wasn't alone. Huddled near the base of the humming device, backs towards me, were 2 figures. Small, clad in dark, heavy work clothes stained with something wet and dark. They were chanting the low, guttural sounds I'd heard in the tube, their voices rough, strained. And they were working on something at the base of the machine, sparks occasionally flying. My hand instinctively went to my palm, where the binding mark remained etched, a faint silver scar. Who were these people? Institute staff? Cultists? Prisoners? Then, one of them coughed, a wet, racking sound, and spat something thick onto the stone floor near the machine's base. Blood. Keeping low, I carefully lowered myself from the tube opening, dropping silently onto the uneven rock floor. Staying in the shadows near the wall, I tried to get a better look. They seemed oblivious to my arrival, completely focused on their task and their chanting. They were adjusting pipes, tightening bolts, sparks flying from a wrench hitting metal. Maintaining the machine? Or changing it? As I edged closer, hugging the shadowed wall, my foot dislodged a loose stone. It skittered across the floor, the sound echoing unnaturally loud in the cavern. The chanting stopped. The figures froze. Slowly, stiffly, they turned. My breath caught in my throat. Their faces, gaunt, pale, streaked with grime and blood. Eyes wide, pupils dilated to black pools, reflecting the torchlight with a feral gleam. Their lips were cracked, stained dark. They looked human, but utterly ravaged, consumed by whatever task they were performing. And hanging from chains around their necks were crude symbols carved from bone, matching some of the glyphs on the machine and the folio. They stared at me, unblinking, their expression shifting from vacant concentration to a low, animalistic cunning. One of them, the larger of the two, let the heavy wrench fall from his hand with a clang. The other hissed, a dry, papery sound, and pointed a trembling, blood-stained finger at my marked hand. Imprint, the larger one rasped, his voice like grinding stones. Atherton's taint. Unscheduled. Must be purged. They began to shamble towards me, moving with a jerky, unnatural gait, their dark eyes fixed on my marked palm. They weren't just workers. They were guardians? Thralls? Bound to this machine, this place? I backed away, raising my marked hand defensively. Stay back. I don't want any trouble. They ignored me, their pace quickening, low growls rumbling in their chests. The chanting started again, lower this time, more menacing, seeming to resonate with the thrumming of the machine behind them. No escape route here except the tube I'd arrived through, high on the wall. Cornered again. My eyes darted around. The archaic machinery in the alcoves, wires, pipes, the gas torches on the walls. As the two thralls lunged, I dodged sideways, grabbing one of the flickering gas torches from its wall bracket. It came loose with a hiss of escaping fuel. Waving the flame erratically kept them momentarily at bay, their feral eyes reflecting the firelight with a mixture of hatred and perhaps fear. Flame, unworthy, the smaller one hissed, circling around. They separated, trying to flank me. My back was against a large, copper-coiled machine. The thrumming from the central orrery intensified. The ghostly figures within the smoky quartz pulsed faster. Think. What did the curator fragment say? Atherton's binding, unstable, paradox. What did Vance's log say? Failsafe? Balance. What did the door whisper? The mark closes. Close what? Maybe not just the folio. Maybe or the machine? The source? The larger thrall lunged again. I swung the torch, catching his ragged sleeve. It ignited instantly, the fabric burning away to reveal pale, strangely unblemished skin beneath the grime. He shrieked, batting at the flames, momentarily distracted. It was my only chance. Ignoring the smaller thrall now scrambling towards me from the other side, I turned towards the massive, thrumming orrery. Raising my marked hand, ignoring the searing heat from the torch still clutched in my other, I ran towards the central, pulsating crystal. Eno, both thralls screamed in unison, a sound of pure agony and terror. Just as the smaller one grabbed at my leg, tripping me, I lunged forward, slamming my marked palm against the cold, vibrating surface of the massive smoky quartz crystal at the heart of Atherton's machine. Crack! Not light this time. Sound. A deafening crack, like the world splitting apart. The thrumming stopped instantly. The chanting died. The torches on the wall sputtered and extinguished, plunging the cavern into absolute darkness. The crystal beneath my hand went cold, inert. And the thralls, their agonized scream cut off, replaced by a dry, crumbling sound. Silence. Darkness. The smell of burnt fabric, ozone, blood, and ancient dust. Had I done it? Had I closed, balanced, something? Or had I just broken everything? The darkness following the deafening crack was absolute, deeper even than the pneumatic tube. The silence pressed in, a heavy blanket smothering the echoes of the machine's hum, the thralls chanting, their final, crumbling screams. Only the faint hiss of the still-burning sleeve on the fallen torch nearby offered any sensory input, casting flickering, unreliable shadows against the unseen walls. The air tasted thick with ancient dust, ozone, and the lingering, metallic tang of blood. My hand, pressed against the now cold, inert surface of the massive quartz crystal, throbbed with a dull, residual ache. The binding mark felt dormant. Quiet. Had I discharged its energy? Broken the machine? Broken the binding? Carefully, pushing myself up, I retrieved the sputtering torch from the floor near where the larger thrall had fallen. Its flame was weak, guttering, but it provided enough light to see. Where the two figures had stood moments before, there were now only piles of dark, brittle dust and fragments of bone rapidly crumbling further, mingling with the grey ash that coated the cavern floor. Purged. Whatever animation had driven them, whatever connection they had to the machine, was severed. Utterly. My light played across the central orrery. It was still, silent. The concentric rings no longer rotated. The strange symbols etched into the brass and iron seemed dull, lifeless. The smoky quartz crystal at its heart was dark, opaque, the ghostly figures within vanished. It felt broken. Dead. Had I done the right thing? Balance. Had I restored balance? Or tipped some other, more precarious scale? The silence felt unnatural, deeper than the archive's usual quiet. It felt like the silence of a stopped heart. Waving the torch ahead, I began to explore the cavern, searching for another way out besides the tube high on the wall. The archaic machinery in the alcoves yielded no clues, just corroded brass, dead vacuum tubes, inexplicable lenses. The walls were sheer granite, glistening with moisture in places, offering no handholds, no obvious passages. Then, behind the dead orrery, half hidden in shadow, I saw it. Not a door, but an archway, carved directly into the rock, leading deeper into the cliff. It looked ancient, predating Atherton's bizarre machinery. The air wafting from it was cold, damp, carrying the smell of deep earth and something else, a faint, almost imperceptible sweetness, horribly reminiscent of the Echo Bloom's floral rot, but purer, cleaner somehow. Where did it lead? Another part of Atherton's original structure? Or something older, something the Institute was built around? Just as I took a step towards the archway, a sound echoed from the pneumatic tube opening high above. A faint hiss, followed by a soft thump as something landed on the ash-covered floor near the tube exit. I froze, swinging the torch beam upwards. Had the book creature followed me? Or something else? Another thump. And another. Small objects were dropping from the tube. I edged closer, holding the torch high. Landing in the ash were books. Small, leather-bound volumes, identical to the untitled one from the holding cart, dropping one after another from the dark maw of the tube. Thump, thump, thump. What the hell? Was the network purging itself? Or was something sending them? Then, the objects changed. Not books. The cracked spectacles. The dried, pressed flower. The one-eyed porcelain doll. They landed softly in the ash pile beneath the tube. The contents of the holding cart, delivered here, to the heart of Atherton's machine. Why? The final item dropped. Heavier. Metallic. The brass skeleton key. It landed with a soft clink atop the pile. And then, silence again. The tube was empty. I stared at the bizarre collection lying in the ash. The ritual components, Ms. Vance had called them. Focus, catalyst, sight, preservation, vessel. Brought here, now that the machine was silent. Why? To restart it? To complete something? My gaze drifted back to the archway leading into the deeper darkness. The faint, sweet smell seemed stronger now. And beneath it, almost too faint to hear, a new sound began. Not thumping. Not whispering. Music. A soft, complex melody played on what sounded like a harpsichord, impossibly distant, yet clear as crystal in the dead air. Elegant, melancholic, strangely familiar, like a half-remembered tune from a forgotten dream. It seemed to be coming from the passage beyond the archway. My hand tightened on the torch. Every instinct screamed danger. The thralls were dust, the machine silent, but I was clearly not alone. And whatever awaited me down that passage, it felt ancient, powerful, and utterly indifferent to the chaos unfolding in the archive above. The silence of the machine felt wrong. The spontaneous delivery of the ritual items felt wrong. The ghostly music felt wrong. Had breaking the machine released something? Or merely changed the nature of the containment? I looked back at the pile of items under the tube. The key. The book. The doll. Tools of Atherton's binding. Tools that had reacted, appeared, guided me. Were they just objects? Or conduits themselves? My marked hand tingled again, faintly. The archway beckoned, the harpsichord music weaving a hypnotic, sorrowful tune. The path back up through the tubes felt impossibly far, uncertain. Was this the true heart of the archive? Not the folio, not the curator, but whatever lay beyond this archway, in the source of the music, the sweetness, the silence left by the broken machine. Had Atherton bound something here? And had I just weakened its cage? The melancholic harpsichord music drifted from the ancient archway, a stark contrast to the dead silence of the broken machine behind me. The faint, sweet scent emanating from the passage intensified, pulling at my senses, overriding the lingering smells of dust and ozone. The pile of ritual items, the book, the key, the doll, the spectacles, the flower, lay inert in the ash beneath the pneumatic tube, their sudden arrival feeling less like a coincidence and more like a deliberate summons. My marked hand pulsed with a low, rhythmic warmth, seemingly resonating with the distant music. Escape through the tubes felt like retreating into darkness, abandoning the questions that had plagued me since I first set foot in this cursed place. Ms. Vance's logs, the curator fragments' warnings, Atherton's secrets, they all felt connected to whatever lay beyond this archway. Balance. Maybe balance wasn't just about closing the folio, maybe it was about understanding what Atherton had truly done here. Gripping the guttering torch, I stepped through the archway, leaving the dead laboratory behind. The passage beyond was clearly not part of the Institute's construction. It was a natural cave tunnel, walls slick with moisture, the floor uneven rock sloping gently downwards. The air grew significantly colder, damp, carrying the clean scent of deep earth mixed with that unnerving sweetness. The harpsichord music grew louder, clearer, echoing softly off the glistening walls. The tunnel twisted, turned, then opened into a vast natural grotto. Stalactites hung like stone icicles from the high ceiling, lost in darkness far above. A narrow stream trickled through the center of the cavern floor, disappearing into a fissure at the far end. And bathed in a soft, internal luminescence emanating from strange, faintly glowing fungi clinging to the walls, sat the source of the music. It wasn't a harpsichord. It was a figure. Seated on a simple stone ledge, seemingly carved from the cavern wall itself, was a man. Impossibly old, gaunt, yet ramrod straight, dressed in the severe black attire I recognized instantly from the portrait in the grand reading room. Hieronymus Atherton. Or something resembling him. His back was towards me, long, skeletal fingers dancing over the strings of an instrument I couldn't quite see, perhaps a lap harp or a bizarrely shaped lute, producing the haunting melody that filled the grotto. He didn't seem solid, exactly. His form flickered slightly at the edges, translucent, like old film projection, blending with the soft glow of the fungi around him. An echo. A preserved imprint. As I took a hesitant step forward, the music stopped abruptly. The silence that followed was heavy, expectant. "Took you long enough?" Custodian, Atherton's voice echoed, dry and ancient, yet carrying a surprising resonance. It wasn't coming from the figure, but seemed to emanate around it, from the very air of the grotto. He didn't turn. "Mr. Atherton." I managed, my voice barely a whisper. "How? How?" The figure chuckled, a sound like rustling parchment. "Persistence. Resonance. The machine you so carelessly disabled helped, of course. Anchored me. Focused the echo." He finally turned his head, and my breath caught. The face was Atherton's, gaunt and severe, but the eyes, the pale, piercing eyes from the portrait glowed faintly with the same sickly green light as the folio symbols. But the binding held, even after the temporal shift Vance mentioned. Until your arrival. Until the catalyst was brought near. "The key?" I asked, my marked hand tingling. "Indeed. And the mark you now bear." He gestured vaguely with a translucent hand towards my palm. "Intended as a failsafe. A means to reinforce the binding should the primary mechanism falter. You applied it directly to the Codex Maleficorum, the folio, as you call it. Bold. Reckless. Effective, in a way. You silenced its song, dispersed its immediate guardian. Codex Maleficorum." I repeated. "What is that book?" Atherton turned fully on the ledge, his glowing green eyes fixing on me. "A nexus. A focal point where realities bleed. Not inherently evil, custodian, but voracious. It absorbs echoes, experiences, possibilities. It sings them, manifests them. The creatures, the whispers, the ink, fragments given form. Dangerous, yes. Chaotic. My machine, the orrery as my assistants called it, was designed not just to bind it, but to harmonize it. To learn from it. To navigate the echoes." "Navigate? You mean travel?" "Like Vance's temporal shift." "Precisely," Atherton's echo confirmed. "The whispers in the gallery, the resonance fluctuations, fragments of other times, other realities, caught in the Codex's web. The machine allowed limited, controlled observation. Perhaps even interaction. Until the instability. Until the binding began to fray." He sighed, a sound like wind through dry bones. Vance suspected. She sought my private codex. Foolish. The true key wasn't a book, but the mark itself. So, the creature made of ink? The book creature in the workshop? Guardians, Atherton clarified. Manifestations drawn directly from the Codex's pages when its containment is threatened. Crude, powerful, bound to protect the source. Your mark repelled it, being a fragment of the binding itself. And the thralls? The men by the machine. Former assistants. Overexposed to the resonance during the machine's construction. Their consciousness eroded, bound to the orrery's function. Their destruction, regrettable, but perhaps necessary, now that the machine is silent. Atherton's glowing eyes narrowed slightly. You broke the harmonizer, Custodian. You silenced the song, yes, but you also broke the lock. The binding is purely passive now, held only by the ambient architecture and your mark. So, it's contained. I asked, a sliver of hope returning. Atherton's echo laughed again, a dry, humorless sound. Contained? Temporarily, perhaps. But the resonance bleed Vance feared? It is now unchecked. The whispers will grow louder. The ink will spread further. The pneumatic network, my original binding infrastructure, will carry the echoes, the fragments, throughout the archive. Without the orrery to harmonize them, they will fester, merge, evolve. The spectral manifestations, the echo blooms, the replicators, they are merely the first symptoms. His glowing eyes fixed on mine again. The Codex Maleficorum wants to be read, Custodian. It wants to share its knowledge, its experiences. It wants to integrate. Severing the curator only removed a potential vessel. The source remains. And it will find other ways. My heart sank. I hadn't solved anything. I'd just traded one danger for another, potentially worse one. What do? I whispered. Can the machine be fixed? Perhaps. With time. Knowledge. Sacrifice. Atherton's echo gestured towards the pile of ritual items I'd left near the tube exit, now faintly visible in the grotto's fungal glow. The components have returned. The cycle seeks to reset. But the orrery requires calibration. Attunement. A conscious mind to guide it, to bear the weight of the echoes without breaking. He looked pointedly at my marked hand. Atherton's seal marks you as a potential candidate. The question is, Custodian, are you willing to pay the price? Pay the price? Become another thrall, bound to this machine, lost in echoes? Or worse? Before I could answer, a new sound intruded. Faint, distant, but unmistakable. Coming from the direction of the archway leading back to the broken orrery chamber. Scratch, scratch, scratch. Not the book creature. This was sharper, metallic. Like claws on concrete. Atherton's echo turned its head slowly towards the archway, its green eyes narrowing. Ah, it breathed, the sound barely audible. It seems the silence has attracted the tension. Uncatalogued entities, drawn by the cessation of the resonance. The archive abhors a vacuum. Custodian. The scratching grew louder, closer. Accompanied now by a low, guttural clicking, and the smell, not floral rot, not dust, but something sharp, sterile, like formaldehyde. You must choose, Atherton's echo whispered, turning back to me, its form flickering more intensely now, the harpsichord music starting again, faint and discordant. Restore the balance? Become the keeper? Or flee, and leave the archive, and perhaps all connected realities, to the consequences of silence? The scratching was just outside the archway now. Something pale and multilimbed, sharp and chitinous, peeked around the corner, multiple black, insectoid eyes glinting in the torchlight. My choice. Stay and face the unknown horrors drawn to the broken binding, attempt to understand and control Atherton's legacy? Or flee back through the treacherous pneumatic tubes, hoping to reach the surface, abandoning the archive to its fate, carrying only the mark and the terrible knowledge I now possessed? The creature in the archway clicked its mandibles and took another step into the grotto. Atherton's echo watched me, its glowing green eyes holding an eternity of forgotten knowledge and impossible choices. The faint, discordant harpsichord music played on,